Good morning.
Good morning, Mary. It's Noah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy beautiful snow out there. I don't know, we got about 4 or 5 inches, so it's nice out.
Really?
Yeah, it's quite white and less, gray and dirty snow. It's fresh snow.
Oh, is it raining now?
Yeah, now it's like sleeting rain. Yeah.
We got about an inch, I think.
Yeah, I took the pup out. She was not pleased with
I can imagine.
weather. She gives me a lot of credit for, the weather. So if it's bad, I'm to blame.
What if it's good?
Yeah, if it's good, then she takes credit. Yeah.
Sounds like a kid.
Good Shabbat.
Good Shabbat.
Everybody all right, I hope?
As far as I know. How about you?
A lot of rain, no snow.
No snow at all?
It snowed a little bit last night, but it's gone. You don't have to shovel rain.
We got about an inch.
Now, where does Noah live that he has all that snow?
I'm up in Rochester.
Is that still in the United States?
We have T-shirts up here that say Rochester, New Hampshire, or just says Rochester, and that it says not New York. That's what we always have to answer.
That's like beyond Manchester, isn't it?
It's about, if you think of Portsmouth as being the center of the clock, it's at the 10 position, about 35 minutes northwest of Portsmouth.
Right on the Maine border.
Yep.
Northwest. Okay, I gotcha. I don't go that far. I stay home.
Just home into the airport, huh?
No, not even to the airport.
Not traveling anymore?
No. I missed it for a while. I don't miss it now. I certainly don't miss it with the pandemic.
Well, so it's not because of COVID that you're not traveling?
No. I stopped somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
Notice for Rubenstein.
No, that's for the young. How's Barbara doing? Oh,
Good. She's having her second cataract done this week.
That's good. I had both mine done.
yeah, she went back to work the same day. She did call me a slave driver, but that's a whole other story.
Not like it used to be.
No. Sandbags didn't lift your head.
Yep.
Now we're our age, huh? How are things in New York, Mom?
Warmish.
Warmish, sun coming out after a very rainy evening.
We've got no sun.
We had plenty of rain. It's like a free car wash. I don't have to wash the cars this week. I'm good.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Kristen, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you. Looked a little quiet in Times Square.
Good.
Yeah.
They even took the Rose Bowl game out of California and put it in Texas.
In Texas, yeah. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year, too.
And to you too.
Hey, Anna.
Is it? Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning. Hello, hello. Good Shabbos. Happy New Year, everybody. Ah,
Hope the big ones and the little ones are okay.
Everyone's being so quiet this morning. Everyone hung over.
Yeah.
It's the end of my vacation. I'm in shock.
oops.
Who said that? It's the end of the vacation.
I think Leah did.
Huh?
I think Leah did.
Leah, you sitting with Mickey Mouse?
What?
Are you sitting with Mickey Mouse?
Yes, I'm with Mickey.
All I could see
Oh,
was his
Mickey.
ears.
Yes, well, here, see.
Yeah.
Does Mickey Mouse count as one of the minion? I have to ask. What do you think? What's the judgment on that?
You counted dogs, why not mice?
Well, no, Bosco
Mickey-
really was part of the minion. I'm not sure about Mickey.
Does he have a soul?
Oh, that I have
Do we-
no doubt about.
Do we talk about souls? But you know, then we have to consider, you know, has he declared, you know, I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, he's my companion today. He is certainly warm-blooded. Coffee runs through his veins.
Is he full of
I-
energy as well then?
Hmm?
Is he full of energy as well?
More energy than I have this morning.
Does Wheeler count as one of the minionettes?
We're on toast.
Don't ask me. That's a ritual
Wheeler
committee
is
question.
gone.
Alex, you sound very far away. Is that my computer or is
Do
it?
I don't know.
It's probably the mic.
Is it any better? I can.
Yes,
Yeah.
much.
Okay, great.
You sounded like you were at the bottom of the tunnel.
I'm not. I'm in the sanctuary.
Aren't you lonely there?
We'll get started in just another couple minutes.
Well, yesterday was a very nice day, weather-wise. It was beautiful. Leslie, you're muted.
There, okay, now, it was beautiful yesterday. We went for a long walk in the woods on these paths that the Greenbelt Association
Yeah, Greenbelt's great.
takes care of. It was a gorgeous day.
We went for a long walk at Maudsley, which was also gorgeous. Really
Uh-huh.
beautiful yesterday.
Leslie, which paths did you go on?
We live in West Newbury there's a reservoir, Newburyport Reservoir, which is on Moulton Street. And there's a path around the reservoir, and then there are all these paths in the woods there that are 4 or 5 miles you can trek around. It's a little muddy right now, but it's worth it.
Nice.
Ann and I walked on the Whittier Bridge, Garrison Trail it's called. It's, we need a flat place, but it was very beautiful and there wasn't much wind, which made it so nice.
Yeah,
Actually warm, it felt warm.
that's what makes the difference, the wind.
Absolutely.
Right.
Leslie, are those trails marked around that reservoir?
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing is that you can enter the trails through on Scotland
Mhm.
Road. There's a little tiny parking place there.
Yeah,
You can enter there. There's a boardwalk that you start on, or you can enter them on Moulton Street, which there's a little more parking. And then you're walking on a gravelly road that Newburyport actually takes care of. And when you want to go off into the woods, there's a path to the right that says private property. but that's where you go.
Thank you for that tip. That's valuable.
There are other ways too, but the property belongs to John Elwell.
Oh, yeah.
You know the Elwells, yeah. So, and he has that big farm, and he's fine with people starting there. So, or you can go to the end of the path, and then it takes you into the woods to the gravel.
Good to know. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Where's
Anytime
Bonnie?
you want to go, I'll lead a trip.
We could have a walking group.
Good.
Yeah, I would do that. I love to walk.
That sounds delightful. Maybe not for today exactly, but we should revisit that topic at some point soon. Especially given how difficult it is to kind of be together outside or inside these days. Having the impetus to like go out and walk together might be a really nice thing to pursue. We're gonna go.
If I could just chime in once, Ed Schenker would be very interested in it, but don't let him lead it because he'll take you astray. That's a joke, but.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Nice to see you all and nice to come together on this early and rainy Shabbos morning. In just a minute, you can all see that Max Kirstein is back with us this morning. He's going to take us through some solid chunks of Birchot HaShachar, of the first part of our service this morning. I'm sorry, up Psuke de Zimra, including Birchot HaShachar. And we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to start us off with a poem this morning, and what I'm thinking about a lot this morning and this week is both kind of beginnings and transitions and cycles, and that is present in a whole bunch of ways this morning and this week. Obviously, we're celebrating the secular New Year and the beginning of 2021. We're also, as many of you are aware, especially those of you who joined us on Tuesday night for Adult Ed, with this morning and reading of Parhsat Veyechi, we close out the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit, and we continue on with the book of Shemot. And so, one of the things that I'm thinking a lot about is just kind of that, how endings and beginnings obviously overlap, right? How really, especially in the Jewish world, I think every ending really does bring us right to another beginning, and how that takes place and what that feels like, and kind of how we prepare for each of those aspects of any one event, right? Bringing something to a close and immediately starting something new. So I want to start this morning with a poem by Joy Harjo, who is actually, I did not know, the Poet Laureate of the United States. She's a Native American poet, and this is called Perhaps the World Ends Here. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. And let's begin our first communal service this year, of course, with Ma Tovu. I'm going to put it up on the screen and invite Max to get us going this morning.
Ma tovu ochalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ochalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael.
Wonderful. And we will now turn to page 16 and continue with Birchot HaShachar. If you would like, please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech vina lechavin ben yom uvelayla.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ma'atir asurumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokach haaretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asali kol tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzedei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifarach.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten leach koach.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamevir she'enai me'enai unuma me'afapai.
Amen. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, removing sleep from our eyes and slumber from our eyelids. And we will turn ahead to page 72. Anyone who is standing may be seated. We're at the bottom of the page. We'll continue with Sadi Katamar.
Sadi katachamar yifra ka'erez balvanum yizgeh shetulim beveit Adonai petarot Eloheinu yafrichu odinu vun beseva Deshenim v'ranananim yiyuhu lehagid ki asher Adonai sori v'lo avlatabo.
Beautiful. Thank you, Max. We're now going to continue on with our first Mourner's Kaddish of the day. I invite anyone who would like to unmute and either join along with the Mourner's Kaddish or respond to the Mourner's Kaddish to do so now. And we are on page 82. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach yirtei, ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon, uvyomechon, uvchaye v'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala, v'zman kariv, v'imru, amen.
Amen.
Yehi shmei Rabba
Leolam
Amaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei v'kudesha, brichu, le'ela, min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru, amen.
Amen.
Yehi shlam rava min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen.
Amen.
And those of you who are standing may stay standing. We'll continue on the next page and go back on mute with Baruch She'amar.
Baruch She'amar v'yahaha olam. Oh wait, never mind. Messed up. One second.
Yep.
Baruch She'amar v'yahaha olam. Baruch Oseh v'yareshi. Baruch Omer v'yoseh. Baruch Gozer u'makayim. Baruch mirachem al haaretz. Baruch mirachem al habriot. Baruch mishalem shekal tov l'real. Baruch halead v'kam lanesach. Baruch podeh u'matzil. Baruch Shemo.
Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, compassionate creator, extolled by your people, glorified by your faithful servants. We laud you with the psalms of your servant David. We extol you in song. We celebrate your fame and melody. We proclaim you sovereign, singular, eternal God. Praised are you, Adonai, sovereign, magnified with songs of praise. And we will continue on with Ashrei in just one moment. And I'm going to ask, as usual, when we get to this part of the service, if there are one, and anyone who is standing may be seated, if there is one or two volunteers to take us through Ashrei by show of hands. I see Sharon and Mike, our Power Ashrei team, and we have to. Noah's still on the line. This has been a big activity for the Hebrew school kids, so we can show Noah how the adults do it too.
I just want to say before we do this, I only want to do it if there isn't someone else who doesn't get to do it and wants to. So let's take another second for if anyone else wants to volunteer who doesn't get to do it.
That's all. I'm the same for me. If somebody else wants to do it, I'll step aside for sure. If two other people want to do it.
Well, we'll have to train other people up to get comfortable to take it over. So for this week, Sharon and Mike.
Everybody who has been coming to the Minyan should know the second part, because we did this for years with me leading it and everybody else responding. So you guys could brush up a little bit and get in on it. But okay, today it's me and Mike, right? Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, oja halelucha selah.
Ashrei Am Shekol Kolo, Ashrei Am Shelenoi Elohav.
Tehillah David, Aromim Elohai HaMelech, Va'avarcha Shimcha Leolam Va'ed.
V'kol Yom Avorchecha, V'alo Shimcha Leolam Va'ed.
Gadol Adonai Hula Me'od, V'ligdulato Ein Cheker.
Dor L'dor Yishabak Ma'asecha, Ugvaratecha Yagidu.
Hadar Kvod Hodecha, V'divrei Niflotecha Asicha.
Ve'zuz Norotecha Yomeru, Ugdolakta Asaprena.
Zecherav Tuvcha Yabiu, V'tzidkatcha Yiranenu.
Anu Branu Adonai, Erica Paimel Belchased.
Okay.
Tov Adonai lakol, v'rachamav al kol ma'asav.
Yadu Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yivachucha.
Kivod malchutcha yomeru, ugvuratcha yidaberu.
V'chodia l'pnei hadam girotaha, v'chavod hadam malchuto.
Malchutcha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechol dor vador.
So mechanol hal naflim, v'sokef l'chal hapufim.
Einei chol elecha yisaberu, v'ata noten lahem et achlam be'ito.
V'altea et yadecha, v'maspia l'chai chai ratzon.
Tzadik Adonai b'chol drachav, v'chasid b'chol ma'asav.
Karov Adonai l'chal karav, l'chol asher yekru be'emet.
Ritzon Yereav Ya'aseh, Be'et Shavatam Yishma V'Yoshiem.
Shomer Adonai kol ha'chaba, ve'ei kol ha'shayim yashmid.
Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pihi, V'Yivarech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Li'olam Va'ed.
V'anachnu nirechya, Yatav yad olam.
Yatav Yad
Hallelujah.
Olam. Hallelujah.
Yasher koach to all three of you. A seamless
Thank you,
transition
Jenny.
in there too between Mike and Janny. Good to hear all the different voices, and yeah, thank you all three of you. And we will continue in the middle of page 100 with Psalm 150, the Hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, hallelujah, virki auzo, hallelujah, 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 bigvurotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, kerov kulo, hallelujah, 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 betei shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, benevel vechinor, hallelujah, 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 betof umacho, hallelujah, hallelujah, beminim ve'ugav, hallelujah, 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 betil tzalei shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, betil tzalei trua. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehalel hallelujah. We continue towards the top of page 102 with the beginning of Az Yashir. If you would like, please rise. Az Yashir Moshe uvenei Yisrael et hashira hazot l'Adonai vayomru le'emor Ashira l'Adonai ki go gasus verachlo rama vayam Ozi vezimratya vayehi li lishua ze'eli ve'anvehu Elohei avi baromenhu. We continue in the middle of page 103. Adonai imloch leolam vaed. Adonai imloch leolam vaed. Kila Adonai mulcham Moshe Boim. Valu Moshim Bartzion Shpodet Harisav. Vaital Adonai hamlucha. V'hai Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz. Vayom Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. And if you're standing, you may be seated. We'll skip ahead to the middle of page 105 and continue with Ha'el B'Tatzumot. Ha'el B'Tatzumot Uzecha, Hagadol Bichlot Shemecha, Hagibor Lanetzach, Vanorav Noratecha, Hamelech HaYoshev, Al Kisei Ram V'Nisa, Shochenat Marom, V'Kadosh Shemaho, V'Chatuv Rabim Tzadikim B'Adonai Yishrim Navatila, Befi Sharim Titala, Udivrei Tzadikim Titbarach, Uvilshon Chasim Titromam, Uvekerev Kedoshim Titkadash, Uvmakalot Rivavot Amcha Beit Yisrael, Brinai Pashim Chamakin B'chol Dor Vador, Shekein Chovat Kol Yitzim L'fanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, V'Elhei Avotenu, L'odot L'Alel, Shabech L'Faer, L'Romeim L'Hader, L'Vrech L'Aleo Kaleis, Al Kol Divrei Shiro V'Tishbachot, David Ben Yishai, Abdecha Meshichecha. And on the top of page 106, we rise for Yishtabach. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. Ayel Amel Haglo Vagdosh Bashamayim Varetz. Ki Lechan Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Avotenu. Shiru Shvacha Halel V'Zimra. Ozmem Shalom Etzach V'Agra. Tila Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut.
Brachot v'chodaot me'ata v'yad olam. Baruch ata Adonai el melech gadol b'tish bachot. El hadon hachodaot adon haniflaot habocher bishrei zimra melech el he haolamim.
Amen. And we continue in the middle of the page with the Chatzi Kaddish. I invite everyone to unmute to respond to the Chatzi Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'amlich malchutei v'chayechon me'machon chai d'chol Beit Yisrael v'hagalav zman karev v'imru Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Me'omaya.
Barach v'yishtabach v'yitbar Shem v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitolei v'yitolal Shmei d'Kudesha b'richu Ilam mikol berchata v'shirata tushchata v'nechemata damiram v'alma v'imru Amen. Baruchu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch
Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or v'choshech oseh shalom uborei et hakol. Praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, creating light and fashioning darkness, ordaining the order of all creation. And anyone who is standing may be seated. We continue on the bottom of page 107 with Ein Kirkacha, which will lead us into El Adon. Ein Kirkacha Adonai Eloheinu b'olam hazeh, v'yanzlatcha malkeinu l'chayei ha'olam haba. Efes biltecha goleinu mot hamashiach, v'yenu melech hamoshienu l'tchiyat hametim. El Adon al kol hamasim baruch umvorach befi kol neshama gadlo v'tuvo malei olam da'at utfuna sovevi moto hamit el chayot hakodesh nehedar v'chavo lahamerkava Zechut umishor lifnei chiso chesed rachamim lifnei kevodo. Tovi meorot shebara Eloheinu yitzaram beda'at bevina ufaskel koach uvura natan bahem liot moshlim bekerev tevel meleim ziv umfikim nogana zivam bechol haolam Semechim betzeitam esasim bevoam osim b'yaim aritzon konam pe'er v'chavod notnim lishmo tzala verina lezecher malchuto kara lashemesh v'yizrach ora'a v'hitkin surat alvana shevach notnim lo kol tzeva Amarom Tiferet Ugedula Srafim Veofanim Vechayot HaKodesh Nai 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 Yain nai 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 yain nai 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 nai. And we'll continue together at the bottom of page 110, singing Or Chadash. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. Veniske kulanu mehera leoro. Veniske kulanu mehera leoro. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. And on the top of page 111, let's read together in the English. Deep is your love for us. Deep is your love for us, Adonai, our God, boundless your tender compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, you taught our ancestors life-giving laws. They trusted in you. For their sake, graciously teach us. Our Maker, merciful provider, show us mercy, grant us discernment and understanding. Then will we study your Torah, heed its words, teach its precepts, and follow its instruction, lovingly fulfilling all its teachings. Open our eyes to your Torah, help our hearts cleave to your mitzvot, unite all our thoughts to love and revere you. Then we will never be brought to shame, for we trust in your awesome holiness and will delight in your deliverance. Bring us safely from the four corners of the earth and lead us in dignity to our holy land, for you are the source of deliverance. You have called us from all peoples and tongues, constantly drawing us nearer to you, that we may lovingly offer you praise, proclaiming your oneness. Praised are you, Adonai, who loves the people Israel. Ve'kerev tanashim chag d'osav v'zot l'chavechecha be'ava, Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'amo Yisrael, b'ahava. As we continue with the Shema, I invite everyone to unmute themselves to say the Shema and the V'ahavta out loud together.
Dad, do you want us to go out?
Shema
Adonai Echad.
V'ahavta V'haya אם שמוע תשמעו מצוותיי אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיכם ולעבדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם. ונתתי את ארצכם מתורה ומלקוש ואספת דגנך וקרשך ויצריך. ונתתי עשב בשדך לבהמתך ואכלת ושבעת. הישמרו לכם פניכם לבבכם וסרתם. ועברתם באלוהים אחרים השתחוויתם להם וחרף אדוני בכם. ועצר את השמיים לא יהיה מטר והאדמה לא תיתן את יבולה. ועברתם מהרה מעל הארץ הטובה אשר אדוני נותן לכם ושמתם את דבריי אלה על לבבכם ועל נפשכם וקשרתם אותם לאות ידכם והיו תותפות בין עיניכם ולימדתם אותם את פניכם לדבר בם בשיטתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען ירבו ימיכם ימי בניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם כימי השמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני משה לאמור דבר על בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף בתל תכלת והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם אחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. And we turn the page to page 114. In just a moment, we'll continue with Micha Mocha. After that, we'll begin the Amidah together on page 115b. And we will unmute ourselves for the Kedusha. And after that, take a couple minutes for silent prayer, reflection, and meditation. For now, page 114. Tilolayon Baruch Barach Moshe Miriam Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba Ve'amru Chulam Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai Micha Mocha Nedar B'Kodesh Nora Tehilot Osef Eleh Shira Chadasha Shiplugulim Shimcha Svat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Imlichu Ve'Amaru Adonai Imloch Le'olam V'ed Tzur Yisrael Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael Uftechinu mecha Yehuda veYisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Page 115b. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גול את בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע. Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, mechakel chaim bechesed, mechaye meitim berachamim rabim. Somech noflim verofe cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato lishenei afar, micha mocha ba'al givurot, umido melach, melech memit umechaye, umatzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman ata lachayot metim, baruch ata Adonai, mechaye hametim.
Nekadesh Shimcha B'olam, Kishem Shema Kishim Oto Bishmei Morom, Kakotu Bayad Niviecha V'Korazeh Elzeh B'Yomar.
Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, Kishem Shema Kishim Oto Bishmei Morom, Kakatu Bayad Niviecha V'Korazeh Elzeh B'Yomar.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavaot, Lelo kol haaretz kavodo. Oz bekol rash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmim kol, mitnasim lumasarafim, lumatam baruch yomeru.
Az bekol ra'ash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmim kol. Az bekol ra'ash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmim kol. Midnasim leumatzarafim, midnasim leumatzarafim, leumatam baruch yomeru.
Baruch kavod Adonai, Mimakamocho malkeinu tofia v'tim lo kolenu, ki mechakim anachnu lok motai v'tim lo b'tzion, v'korov yomeinu l'labo et tishkom, v'gadal v'tikadash b'tok Yerushalayim yircha, l'dor v'dor netzach netzachim.
Kom chamakin tofia v'timoch alenu ki mechakim anachnu lach, matai timoch b'tzion b'karav b'yameinu le'olam v'tishkon. Tikadav v'tikadash b'tok Yerushalayim yircha, l'dor v'dor netzach netzachim.
B'yeheinu kirena malkutecha ador ha'amor b'shrei uzecha
Aydei David Meshiach Tzidkecha.
Imlo Adonai Leolam Elohai Zion Ledor Vador Hallelujah.
Ledor vador nagid golecha unetzach tzachim kedushatcha nakdish v'shivchacha Elohim mipinoim u'shulamed ki amalch gadol v'kadosh ata baruch ata Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'meru. Amen. And we will continue with the full Kaddish, which I won't put up on the screen, but anyone who wants to unmute to say the responsive parts is welcome to do so now. Yikara v'ikadash me Rabbah.
Amen.
Yalmad yirachirtei v'emlich machlutei v'chayachon v'mechon v'chay v'chol Beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv v'meru.
Amen.
Yehi shmei
Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Le'olam Yivarach.
Barach v'shabach v'tbar v'shaman v'naseh v'tadar v'tlei v'talal shmei v'kudesha v'richu ve'elam mikol v'chata v'sharata v'shmata v'nechamata v'amiran be'alma v'meru. Amen. Titkabal tzonotahon v'chol Beit Yisrael kadam v'hon b'shmaya v'meru.
Amen.
Amarav b'shmaya v'chaim aleinu v'al Yisrael v'meru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom imromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'meru. Amen. And we will go back on mute, except I will ask Barry Pastor to unmute himself, and we will continue on page 139 with the beginning of the Torah service.
Ein komocho be'elim Adonai v'ein kemasecha. Malchus eka malchus kol olamim. Umimshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz li'amo yitain. Adonai yivorech esamo v'shalom. Aporachamim. Heitiv navetzoncha esion. Tivenecha mos Yerushalayim. Ki v'chol levad batachnu. Melech el ram v'nisa. Adon olamim. Vayehi ben Aharon, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, V'yafutzu oivecha, V'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, Ki mitzion teitzei Sorah. Ki mitzion teitzei Sorah, u'devar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenasan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenasan Torah, Torah. Li'amo Yisrael. B'hikdusha so.
Thank you so much, Barry. Yasher Koach. Anyone who's standing may be seated. And of course, as we're wishing Yasher Koachs, which is probably not grammatically correct, a big Yasher Koach to Max Kirstein for carrying us through a large chunk of Psuke de Zimra this morning. Max, you keep up the practice and I'll be able to sleep in one of these Shabbos mornings, which would be really wonderful. So thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you for taking us through so much at the beginning of our services. It's really, really great to hear different voices. And really great to hear you as you continue your journey to your bar mitzvah prep. So
Thank you.
Yasher Koach. So as I mentioned earlier this week, we're going to be reading Parhsat Veyechi, and this is a week of beginnings and endings in many different ways. Of course, you know, for us in this moment, in this time, we're still fresh off of our celebration of a new year. Hopefully none of us is still, you know, in recovery mode from a night that got too wild. I don't think New Year's Eve 2021 was really the year for that. But you know, you never know. Of course, that offers us all, you know, as individuals and a community, a fresh beginning and a little bit of a reset, looking forward to the new year. And of course, this morning, we're really coming to an end. And with our reading of Parhsat Veyechi this morning, we arrive at the end of Sefer Breshit, the book of Genesis, the first of the 5 in our cyclical Torah reading. And the book concludes with Jacob and subsequently Joseph's death, and really kind of the closing of the first extended chapter of the Torah. And we're really going to be moving mostly away from character-driven narrative and from stories of individuals, with kind of the exception of, you know, Moshe and his immediate family, more or less, into the realm of nation building and national struggle. And we're really going to move from Jacob's children to Bnei Israel, which is, when you literally translate the words, exactly the same thing, since, you know, Jacob's other name is Yisrael, and Jacob's children and Bnei Israel is the same phrase. But they really mean two different things. And we're leaving one behind. We're leaving Jacob's children behind and moving into Israel's sons, and everything that means. And what we'll read this morning really does look forward to that transition. What we'll read in our cycle of the Triennial is a pretty fascinating series of brachot, of blessings from Jacob to his sons. And I'm inclined in this instant to put blessings into quotes, because as we'll read, it's really not all good. This is certainly, I think the best phrase to sum this up, and I see Sharon shaking her head a little bit because she knows what we're going to read. It's certainly a mixed bag at best. And even though it's all written in kind of some flowery poetic language, it's abundantly clear that Jacob's last testament to some of his sons is more admonishment than blessing. And if anyone wants to, as we go along, give a closer read to the Eitz Chaim commentary, and I'll put a link in the chat if anyone wants to pull it up for themselves after I'm done talking, the words are actually a pretty striking reflection of what will become each tribe's reality later in the Torah and in the time after the Torah and into the time of Joshua and the prophets, talking about each tribe's failures and successes, specifically upon entering the land of Israel. And, you know, the stories of struggles and politics that I'll speak for myself in saying I don't think all that much about, right? I tend to kind of read through the Torah cycle, and you view especially the beginning of the book of Joshua with the conquest and the falling of the walls around Jericho. You think it's kind of all onto easy street, and it's certainly not. And the commentary in the Eitz Chaim really paints a picture of kind of what that reality was more akin to. But before we get into this series of blessings or words that we'll read this morning as part of the Torah reading, I want to hone in on just one verse together, and it actually comes before we pick up this morning. It's a part of Jacob's blessing to Joseph's sons, to Ephraim and Manasseh, his grandchildren. And this is really where Jacob cements the status of Joseph's two sons as equal to that of his own 12 sons, turning these two grandchildren into tribes of their own right, on par with their uncles. And this is chapter 48, verse 16. I'll pull it up in just one second. But the reason I want to highlight this is, and this ties in also to what we'll get to at the end of this morning's Parsha when we say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, something we discussed at length on Tuesday night. This declaration among ourselves that we should be strong, and may we be strengthened. Really talking about that kind of role of support and strengthening each other that is so vital to us. I want us to think a little bit this morning and a little bit this week and a little bit this year about really our ability to bless each other and our ability to bring blessings into the lives of our family and friends. And so I'm going to pull up this verse, chapter 48, verse 16. It is a pretty famous one. And I just wanted to start our Torah service this morning. I'll read it first in English, and then it's a very famous verse in its own right, something that is, a blessing that we give to our children, and it also has got a tune to it. So I want to start this morning's Torah service. I know everyone but me will be muted, but I hope that if anyone knows the tune, you'll sing it along with me and think really about how we hope to spread blessings far and wide in this coming year. And so this is Jacob talking to his grandsons, and he says, "The angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the lads, in them may my name be recalled, and the names of my father, Abraham and Isaac, and may they be teeming multitudes upon the earth." Hamahalach hago eloti. Malach hago eloti mikora yevarech et hanearim bikarev ahem shemi v'shem avotai Avraham ve'Yitzchak ve'yidgu la'rov bekerev haaretz. And as we finish some cycles and start other cycles, may it really be a year of blessing and blessing that we bring to ourselves and to each other and to our friends and family and our community. And just think of new ways to really bring joy and blessings into each other's lives. Yeah, Mom.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we sing that verse, be it at at the time of a circumcision ceremony, or a ceremony where you name a baby girl, you also add Yaakov's name at the end as well. So we include the three forefathers in that.
Thanks, Mom. Any other comments or thoughts before we get started with this morning's Torah reading? All right. In just a second, I'll unmute us so that we can say La'asok b'divrei Torah together. For those of you who have an Eitz Chaim, we're going to pick up at the beginning of chapter 49, which can be found on page 298. It's a very brief reading this morning. Oh, and like I said, I will put that link in the chat if anyone wants to follow along more closely with the English and the commentary. That link is on the chat. You can pull it up. It's a very short reading this morning, so I will probably just go more or less straight through, unless anyone, as usual, wants to put something in the chat and pause me. I will pause. We're going to read through verse 27, I think. I will pause a couple verses before that. It's customary when we get to the end of a book of the Torah, everybody stands. It's up to you whether you want to stand or not. It's a little bit less dramatic without having the actual scroll in front of us, but we'll make the best of it. Traditionally, everybody stands, and that's when once I get to the end, first the congregation would say Chazak, Chazak, V'ni Chazek, and then I'll say that back to you. So when we get a couple verses before that, I'll pause and cue you up. And remind you all to unmute in a second, and we'll finish the book of Bereshit that way. So with that, we will turn to the Chumash. First, let's come on mute and say La'asok b'divrei Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen. Vayikra Yaakov el banav vayomer Heasvu v'agida lachem et asher yikra etchem b'acharit hayamim. Hikavtzu v'shimu b'nei Yaakov v'shimu el Yisrael avichem. Reuven bechori ata kochi vereshit oni yeter seit veyeter oz pachaz kamayim al tochar ki alita mishkevei avicha az chilata yitzui ala Shimon v'Levi achim klei chamas mechirotehem Besodam al tavo nafshi bikalam al techad kevodi ki ve'apam hargu ish uvirtzonam ikru shor arur apam ki az ve'evratam ki kashata achal kein b'Yakov ve'afitzim v'Yisrael Yehuda Ata yoducha achecha yadcha be'oref oivecha yishtachavu lecha b'nei avicha gur aryeh Yehuda miteref b'ni alita kararavat ke'aryeh uchlavi mikimenu lo yasur shevet miYehuda umechokek mi bein raglav Ad ki avo Shilo velo yikat amim Osri la gefen iro vela sorika beni atono ki beis bayain levusho uvedam anavim suto chachlili einaim mi yain uleven shinaim mechalav Zevulun lechof yamim yishkon vehu lechof oniot vayarchato al tzidon Yisachar chamor garem rovet ben hamishpetayim vayar menucha kitov ve'et haaretz kine'ema V'yet shichmo lispol vayhi lemas oved dan yadin amo ke'echad shiftei Yisrael Yehidan nachash alei derech shififon alei orach hanoshech ichvei sus vayipol rochvo achor Lishuacha kiviti Adonai. God gedud yegudenu vehu yagud akev. Me'asher shmena lachmo vehu yitain ma'adani melech. Naphtali ayala shlucha hanotain imre shafer. Ben parot Yosef, ben parot ale ain, banot tzada ale shur. So here's where I'm going to pause just for a moment. Like I said, it's pretty quick, kind of reading through that poetic song of blessings. We're on verse 23. We're going to read through verse 27. So I invite anyone who would like to stand. Or if you don't want to stand, at least prepare yourself to unmute so that I'll pause and give you kind of a hand signal, and you can start us off with Chazak, Chazak, V'nei Chazek. So we're back on verse 23. Vayimara ruhu ve'robu vayishtumuhu balei chitzim vateshev be'etan kashto vayafozu zro'ei yadav midei avir Yaakov misham ro'eh even Yisrael me'el avicha vayazreka ve'et Shaddai vayivarcheka Brochot shamayim me'al, birchot tehom rovetz et tachat, birchot shadayim veracham, birchot avicha gavru al birchot horai, ad ta'avat kivot olam, tiena lerosh Yosef ulekad kod nizirachav, binyamin ze'ev yitraf, baboker yochal ad, V'la'erev yichalek shalal.
Chazak,
Chazak v'nitchazek. You may be seated. Thank you all for participating in that last little bit of kind of flair and drama, and really may it be a year in which we can strengthen and support each other and really kind of rebuild our strength back up together, which is kind of really what Chazak V'nei Chazek is all about, right? We've been strong in the past. May we only get stronger going into the future. Before we transition to the healing service, I know it's been a little bit quiet in terms of commentary and in terms of me doing most of the talking. Was there anything in the Torah reading that jumped out to anyone, or anything they wanted to bring up or discuss? It does kind of need like that little bit of a deeper reading and analysis if you really want to make the most of each of those tribal blessings. The one verse I'll highlight really quickly, and it would have been a good place to pause because it's appropriate to pause, was back on page 303, verse 18, Lishuatcha kiviti Adonai, I wait for your deliverance, O Lord, which is kind of brings us back to, it kind of takes us out of the poem and out of this blessing and kind of admonishment and brings us back to possibly Jacob as a human being, right? Like he is kind of sitting on his deathbed and trying to get out his last words to all 12 of his sons, and now kind of 13 of his sons, since he's adopted Jacob's two sons on that same level, and he can't quite make it through. And so he needs to kind of interrupt and make his own last final plea to God for just a little bit more strength to make it through what he wants to leave each of his sons with as his last words. Yeah, Sharon.
I'm not sure where to take it, but I just continue to just be really, really baffled about the relationship to Levi throughout this whole Torah. I mean, he's in this particular part, Yaakov pretty much comes down on both Shimon and Levi for their anger and their violence and their acting out their anger. And then later, Pinchas, does this horrible, violent thing of, killing the Israelite man and the non-Israelite woman in the middle of their sex. And then Levi is rewarded by being the priests of the tribe. I mean, I just don't get the whole Levi thing. It's very odd. Are they really to be honored? Are they to be rebuked? Or, and Levi is traditionally given a real place of honor as the priestly caste. And I mean, I don't know what to say about it. I just find it really, really baffling.
Yeah, and just to give that comment a little bit more context, just in kind of the past and the future, Levi, along with Shimon and his brother Shimeon, are the two who kind of mastermind the plot to destroy the nation of Shechem, or the tribe of Shechem, after their sister Dinah is raped by one of their sons. Yeah, it's especially interesting, and Levi, of course, will be the priestly class, and that's the tribe that Moshe and Aaron and Miriam belong to, and Pinchas is Aaron's grandson, who does take this. He's kind of known as the zealot in the Torah, and he kills this Jew who, as Sharon said, is having sex with a non-Jew, and it's kind of viewed as this like saving action, pretty directly in the text by God, and yeah, it's especially kind of striking in this text that we just read, in chapter 49, that it really does. Jacob is obviously still angry about what Shimon and Levi did, and about kind of perhaps overreacting in their own zealotry with the nation of Shechem, and really kind of putting Jacob and his whole clan into danger, and throwing them into the middle of conflict. And it is interesting, part of kind of the priestly lineage is hinted at in that Jacob says, that these two tribes will be divided in Jacob's scattered. I will scatter them in Israel, which is part of kind of the priestly lineage, right? Like they don't get their own section of the land of Israel, which in some senses is a double-edged sword. Obviously they do take up this elevated role and get this elevated status, but it does come with, they're the only one of the tribes to not have land and to not be kind of actively engaged in governance in the way that all the others do. So it's hinted at a little bit, but yeah, I think it's a great question. If you're interested, and remind me after Shabbos, Shai Held, who's a friend of my parents and a rabbi who I reference relatively often because he writes really good essays on the weekly Parsha. He has kind of a whole 5-page essay on what exactly, specifically Levi's heritage within this bracha is, and how there is a lot of tension there between, is what they did laudable, or is it something that really deserves scorn? So I'm happy to pass that on to you after Shabbos and anyone else who's interested. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, Fran.
Well, it looked like there was a lot of disparagement for a number of them. What about Reuven? He was mentioned as climbing into the father's couch or something. I don't know the backstory here, and I don't know the forward story of him, but so many people name their children Reuven, so he had to have some redeeming qualities.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, one of the things we've been tracking over the last kind of number of weeks reading through this part of the Torah is kind of the ups and downs of the various, sons of Jacob, and kind of how that represents power struggles and the continuation in the theme of Genesis of, firstborn and subversion of the firstborn and who really takes over the lineage. The specific, when you mounted your father's bed, my couch, that refers back after Rachel died. Reuben kind of takes over one of Jacob's concubine wives, and it's one of those reactions where Jacob, the text kind of indicates that he disapproves, but he doesn't necessarily. There's not as much fire as there is in this text. As far as like actual naming goes, I think that's a really interesting conversation. I mean, I think a lot of the biblical names that we elevate are kind of a lot more weighted than we give them credit for. I think if you're, searching through, and this isn't meant as a disparagement of anyone named Reuben or anyone whose family has a Reuben in it or anything like that, but as you're searching through, the book of biblical names and you're looking for one that could also kind of fit in 21st century America and in 21st century Jewish society, it's Reuben, it's Ruvain, like it has a good ring to it. It's an accepted name. It's Jacob's firstborn. So we kind of make the assumption that it's elevated and that it's kind of a praiseworthy character. You read the text closely, it's really not that clear. But given kind of what our lineage and heritage is, it's still, listen, Jacob doesn't take enough offense to write him out of the family, right? Like he's still one of the 13. And so there is still that desire to kind of hold on to the lineage. And the one thing you can kind of praise Jacob for in this context is that certainly he has some pretty biting things to say to his sons, but he includes all his sons, right? Compare him to Abraham and Isaac, who we really have this split and this dichotomy where they have more than one child, but they're not able to kind of keep that household together. Jacob may kind of end his time by telling some of these kids that they're disappointments, but he doesn't kick them out of the family, or he doesn't create active splits with his kind of last actions where it's like, yeah, Reuben, you're a disappointment, and Judah, I'm elevating you, and therefore you guys are going to hate each other forever. And so there is, a little bit more of a kind of distinction made there, whereas like, I don't think you would ever see a Jewish baby named Esau in quite that same way that I think, names like Reuben have taken hold. So I hope that starts to kind of address the line of thought that you were getting to. Yeah, Barry.
Speaking of what Sharon was talking about, how come Levi is the only one not to get any land?
He's not the only, well, the only
out of the 12
one.
tribe. I mean,
yeah.
So I mean, maybe is that, I mean, back when that meant a lot back then, right? Like,
yeah, and so what I think, so he, sorry, I misspoke. He really, that tribe really is the only one to not get any land. I think part of it has to do with that kind of compromise of elevation to the priestly class. There is kind of very intentionally supposed to be a split between the priestly tribe and the ruling tribe. And they're really not something that are ever supposed to come into contact, overlap each other. That's kind of one of the great controversies that comes out of the Hanukkah story, when the Hasmoneans kind of formed their own dynasty as a ruling priestly class. That's not something that Jewish, that kind of Torah Israelite governance is supposed to have. And I think that lack of having land really kind of reinforces that power structure. If you don't have that base of like a central tribal kind of unit and area like all these other tribes do, you don't really have that same capability and power to rule in the way that I think, power worked all the way back then. And I think it helps reinforce that structure. Yeah, as Barry says, separation of church and state, in like a really, really literal sense, I think, for them back then. You're muted again, Barry.
Yeah, I get you. But not having land back then, are you trying to say that because they were a priestly class that makes them elevated or not elevated?
Well, I
Because they
think
they're wandering, now they're wandering and they have nothing to defend, crops, eat, they rely on others.
yeah, I mean, there certainly is that aspect of reliance on others. They rely on the other tribes in a very direct way. And that's, you know, once you kind of read the later books of the Torah a little bit closer, you know, that's part of all of these sacrifices and tributes. A lot of it is about feeding the priests, which needed to happen because they didn't have their own kind of land and commerce in the way the other tribes did. And so I think, you know, it's not a clear elevation or demotion. Like I think there is give and take.
Okay.
I think there's some spiritual elevation,
Right.
some status elevation with
That's
that,
how
and some
that's how I was
physical.
going with that. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Mike. Our reigning Levi.
Yeah, that's a little troubling, but the the concept of land and whether it's communal or individual and all that has been a problem for humanity forever. And all battles are fought, not all battles, but most battles are fought over land and territory. And when you look at ownership, I always think of the Indians or first people, indigenous people, many of whom don't have the concept that the land is owned by everybody, and it's for the benefit of the group. I don't know whether when the tribes are assigned land, it is like communal land or individual land, because certainly most people as individuals did not own land, and those, I mean, even today, most people don't own land in the world. Very few people own land. So I'm just thinking about it and what does it mean? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And, you know, I think, again, like, it's easy to think of the 12 tribes as a unified whole, which I don't think was ever true in the way that in that really kind of simplified way. And then it's easy to think of each subset as a tribe of a unified whole. And I don't know if that was quite true either, because you get into kind of, you know, what is this whole book about? This whole book is about like brothers, and by this I mean Genesis. It's about brothers fighting to kind of figure out who is first in line for their father's heritage. And I do think a big part of that is material wealth, and material wealth is directly related to land. And so, you know, I think even within these tribal structures, I think there's a lot of kind of, you know, you view it almost like you view it as a family tree, the way it spiders out. And I think I'm sure that was true kind of as you go down the line and look closer and closer as to what kind of the unit was. Yeah. And just to quickly respond to Joel's question, are Levi's priests or more like Gabbais? So when we talk about the tribe of Levi, Kohanim, who were definitely the priests, are, again, you know, a subsect of the tribe of Levi. And so they played a lot of different roles, ranging, I think, from the priestly to more kind of administrative and facilitator roles in the worship life of ancient Israel. So I think it really encompasses all of those things. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for some good questions and some good thoughts and some good conversation. I am going to turn it back over to Sharon as we change pace a little bit and turn to our healing service.
Okay. Let's give it our all to start the new year, please. Get all the healing in we can. Misheberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha la'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach avotenu ve'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Moshe v'Aharon, David u'Shlomo, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, Bilha, v'Zilpa, Hu yivarech v'yirafeh et hacholim, b'nei Avraham v'Sarah, b'nei Adam v'Chava. May God, who blessed our ancestors, bless and heal all those near and far, known to us and not known to us, healing of body and of spirit, all who are in need of it now. Louisa McCleary, Nancy Peace, Shoshana Bat Pinchas V'Chana, Meir Ben Fega V'Aaron Yitzchak, Dennis McNeely, Jess Kramer, Alexis Watson, Joel Gordon, May Daub, Bob Jelly, Bruce Mallory, Alan Mann, Barbara Dowd, John O'Brien, Jacques Mansey, Carol Barker, Catherine Doloff, Ken Bosey, Chana Bat Rivka, Lorraine Daniluk, Denise Stelmack, Yitzchak Ben Yisrael, Madeline Blake, Rachel Barcelona, Corey Brown, Kara Smoley, Adam Stander, Fotios Rallis, Chana Esther Bat Ayala Hadar. And anybody here who has a name they would like to include specifically in our healing prayers, if you would indicate so now, we'll do that.
Yeah, Barry Salloway,
My dad, Bill Salloway.
Angie,
Leah Kaplan.
Barry Pastor,
Arlene Kaiser, Marv Perry, Irene Pera, and Barbara Pastor.
anyone else whose hands I didn't see? And obviously, as Sharon said, that list of names is just a fraction of the people. Obviously, the people we don't know, but I'm sure there's many other people we do know who need some healing spirit in their lives, whether that be physical healing or spiritual healing. So let's take just another couple seconds to include them in our prayers and to really send our healing prayers as far as wide as we can hope to. Sharon, whenever you're ready.
Ba'avur she'anachnu mitpalalim ba'avuram, b'shchar zeh hakadosh baruch hu yimalei rachamim aleihem, lahachalimam u'lerapotam, lahachazikam u'lahachayatam, v'yishlach lahem meira refuah shalema, refuat hanefesh u'refuat haguf, Shabbat himilis oka refuah krova lavo, hashtaba agala v'zman kariv, v'nomar amen.
Thank you so much, as always, Sharon. And now we are going to turn to the Haftarah. And I probably should have double checked with him yesterday, but Mike, are you still game to read the Haftarah this morning?
Sure, if you'll tolerate me.
We will more than tolerate you. We will enjoy and celebrate you.
I have some vision problem, and that's going to be my main hindrance, but I'm doing it and I practiced it.
That's the spirit, man. Just
Okay.
do it. I will
right.
put it up on the screen for those of you following along at home. We're on page 313 in the Eitz Chaim. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar bin v'im tovim v'ratzah v'divreihem hanemorim ba'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboker b'torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo Amen. Vayikravu Yemei David Lamu Vayetzav Et Shlomo V'no Lemor Anochi Holeg B'derek Kol Haaretz V'Zakta V'Hayita La'ish V'shamarta et Adonai Elohecha Lalechet B'drachav Lishmor Hukotav Mitzvotav Umishpotav Vedotav Kakotu B'Torah Moshe B'man Tashkil Eight Kol Asher Taseh V'Eight Kol Asher Titnesham Leman Yokim Adonai Et Devoro Asher Diber Elahai Lemor Im Yishmeru V'Necha Et Dorkam La Leched Lefonai Bemet Bekol Vavav Uvchol Nafsham Lemor Lo Yikare Lecha Ish Me'al Kisei Yisrael V'gam Ato Yodata Asher Asali Yoav Ben Tzeruya Asher Asa Lishnei Sorei Sebaot Yisrael Lavner Bener V'lasal Ben Yatar V'Yahargaim V'Yosem Demei milkomom b'shalom v'yitain demei milkomom b'hagroto asher b'matnov uvna'ala asher v'raglov V'asita kechomatecha v'lo torei sevoto b'shalom she'om v'livnei varzalai hagiladi taseh chesed v'hayu Be'ochlei shulchanecha kichein karvu elai bechvarchi mipnei avshalom ochicham v'hinei imcha shimi ven gerav ven chaimini Mebachurim, Vehu Kalalani, Kalalani Mretzet, Biom Lekti Machanaim, Vehu Yoram, Likrati Hayardain, Veshba lo Adonai lemor imamitecho bechorev vato tenakehu ki ish hacham ata miadato ish asher taselo v'horadtom et shivato bedam shom. Vayishka David imavotav vayikover be'ir David v'hayomim asher molak David al Yisrael arbaim shana bechevron molek sheva shanim U'Yerushalayim alak shloshim v'shalosh shanim U'Shlomo yashav al kisei David aviv v'tikon malkuto me'od. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik b'kol hadorot ho'el haneman homer v'yoseh hamdaber umkayem shekol devarav emet v'sedek neman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'nemonim devarecha v'davar echad midvarecha okur lo yashuv reikam Ki el melech ne'eman v'rakaman ata baruch atah Adonai ho'eh hane'eman b'chol devarav.
Amen.
Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu v'laluat nefesh toshia b'marav yomenu baruch atah Adonai mesameach Tzion b'vanecha samchenu Adonai Eloheinu b'le'ohu hanovi avdecha Uv Malchut Beit David Mishichecha Bimheiro Yovo V'Yogel Libenu Al Kisolo Yeshev Zor V'Lo Yimchalu Od Hakerim Et Kavodo Ki V'Shem Kodshecha Nishbator Lo Shalo Yikve Neiro Leolam Vo'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Magen David Al HaTorah V'Al Avodah V'Yam V'Yom HaShabbat Hazeh Shenatato Lanu Adonai Eloheinu Likdusho V'Limnucha V'Kovod U'Tifaret Al HaKol Adonai Eloheinu Anaknu Modim Lok M'Barakim Otak Yitbarak Shimcha B'Fi Kol Chai Tamid Leolam Vo'ed Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yasher koach. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thumbs up all around.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Michael. And I got so excited to lead into Mike's Haftarah that I kind of forgot to give the intro and the overview. But obviously, for those of you who are following along, we're reading about kind of David's last deathbed words to his son Solomon, getting ready to take over his lineage. And if you really want to, dive into vindictive last words that are kind of filled with anything but blessing. A large part of what we just read is David kind of asking Solomon to make sure he keeps the hit out on his enemies. So whatever we read about Reuben and Shimon and Levi and some of the other sons, it still could get a little bit darker and more violent. So interesting to kind of compare and contrast the biblical lineage with the kingship lineage. But I want to move back to this morning's Torah reading for a couple minutes, or this morning's Parsha, the themes of this morning's Parsha, for a couple more minutes together. As I alluded to earlier, this morning's Parsha is very much a portion of transitions. Certainly, we as readers and weekly followers of our Torah cycle can feel those transitions coming. If we had been lucky enough to be reading from the scroll this morning, to all be in this room together, we would have lifted it up for the Chazak, Chazak, V'ni Chazek, and we would have seen that 3-inch gap that exists in the text between the book of Genesis and the book of Exodus. We would really kind of be able to see that transition. I do believe that the characters in the narrative experience this transition as well. I think they know what's going on. And there's certainly a symmetry to this story that makes it feel nicely wrapped up. After all, Jacob lives a full 17 years in Egypt, reunited with his favorite son for exactly as long as they were together when Joseph was a boy, before he was sold off to Egypt by his brothers. Yet there's also a lot of tension that exists in the heart of this Parsha. And it's also one that has everything to do with transitions. As Jacob and Joseph transition into death, there is a profound unease. Each of them, despite long and presumably fulfilling lives, don't end their lives restfully. Rather, if anything, they ask not to be laid to rest. Each of them wants his body brought up to the land of Israel to be buried. And I think that sense of unease is pervasive in the narrative as well. Perhaps Joseph and Jacob don't know what comes next, but again, as readers, we certainly do. The enslavement and the brutality under a different Pharaoh, who we will read next week, did not know Joseph. That leaves us similar to the audience watching a horror movie, yelling at the screen. Don't stay in Egypt. Don't come back after burying Jacob. Look out. But of course, all of this is to no avail. The story never changes. Every year, Jacob and Joseph die in Egypt, and every year, that new Pharaoh rises to power who did not know Joseph. This process of transition to slavery, and maybe some of the fault, perhaps lies at Jacob's feet. He went down to Egypt as an old man to see his son one more time. And instead, it turns out that he's got a lot more vigor than we initially give him credit for. The word Veyechi, the name of this week's Parsha, means that he lived. Jacob lived his remaining 17 years fully, making up for lost time with his beloved son, not taking the opportunity he otherwise might have had to head back to the Holy Land and reestablish his growing people there. There's a great irony then to be found in Jacob convening his children at the end of his life. As we read in our opening verse this morning, chapter 49, verse 1, "Come together that I might tell you what is to befall you in the days to come." That seems to be the one thing that's really distinctly missing from Jacob's words from his sons. We get no foreshadowing of what is coming immediately to them and to their progeny in the days to come. Aviva Zornberg chalks this up to an interpretive midrash that says that at the moment Jacob was about to begin telling his sons their immediate future, his connection with the divine evaporated. Or as Zornberg puts it, Jacob drew a blank. Having lived the fullness of his life out in Egypt, at the climactic moment of transition, he suffers a profound blockage. Jacob describes his own life to Pharaoh by saying, few and hard have been the years of my life. A statement in his 13th decade of life that should probably strike us as untrue. Certainly, he's faced his fair share of difficulties, but his family, his relationship with God, all his long years, certainly there has been much joy and lots to celebrate. I would posit, however, that perhaps Jacob suffers from living a little bit too much in the moment and in the past. Jacob is scarred by his decades living with Lavan. He dwells on the loss of his favorite wife and his favored son. And when finally reunited with Joseph, he completely forgets how to plan for and move into the future. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, writing about this week's Parsha as a transitional moment, says that our Parsha, which closes the book of Genesis, reveals that in a covenantal life, every moment is multidimensional. One lives in the moment, but the future is part of the present and affects it. I expect that this multidimensional living, as Rabbi Greenberg puts it, and our own embodiment of that experience will be one of our primary challenges to rise to in the year that has just begun. To continue living in the present moment, one where we must balance the pain and suffering still so present in our world with the joy and satisfaction we strive to find in our own daily lives, is going to be difficult. To say nothing of also holding out our hope for the light at the end of this particular tunnel that we're in with the COVID-19 crisis. And remembering not to just hold that hope as some sort of a magic light switch that one day will get to flip and things will go back to normal, but remembering that we have a say in building what comes at the end of this particular tunnel for ourselves and for our communities. Sometimes you get to that big moment, you get to the end, that precipice of the future, and like Jacob, you draw a blank. You haven't quite done the work to plan that future, and when you finally get to move into it, you realize that, as Barry put it, you're having a massive senior moment at this really crucial moment of rebuilding. I hope that over the course of the next couple months and over the course of the next year, despite the fact that we don't know exactly what our timeline is or what we're planning for, I hope we can work together to make sure we are fully prepared for whatever it is we're going to face and whatever our own process of rebuilding and being able to move forward is going to look like for ourselves and for our community. As we look forward to a year that will bring with it, God willing, change and blessing and growth and health and happiness and really a rebuilding of the in-person communal structures, which we've been missing so much. And I hope that by taking a really active role in planning that and hoping that and building that together, that we can rise to those moments as they come and not react as Jacob might have in drawing a blank and not knowing quite how to make that pivotal transition that was really at his feet. So that's what I'm hoping we can kind of move into the new year looking towards and really actively planning and engaging for. Yeah, Gene, I see your hand if you want to unmute.
I find myself surprisingly wanting to defend Jacob here. None of us know the future. We all are in the present, each moment of our lives. And what he's doing is he's talking to each of his sons about who they are. And as there was a comment in Eitz Chaim about this, that our future is dependent on what we do with who we are. So in giving each of his sons this mirror, sort of to say, look, this is how I see you at least, he's giving them something that if they choose, they can work with, which then ultimately will depend, their future depends on the choices they make.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of other side of the coin. And I also think, going back to some of the discomfort we might have felt or expressed when actually reading through these blessings from Jacob to his children, it doesn't all need to be good, right? If you're talking about kind of hoping for growth and potential for growth and trying to motivate other people to growth, just praise doesn't always get us there. I think there's certainly room, if Reuben really has regret or worries about his future, maybe making the changes that he or what will come to be his tribe need to do is face the mistakes they've made in the past, and not just kind of have their father glide over them in his last words. So I do kind of really like what you're bringing up as viewing each of these blessings as both either as a source of strength to come back to and to grow out of, or as some constructive criticism to push the growth where it's needed. I think that's great perspective. Thank you, Gene. Any other thoughts or comments before we move on from the book of Genesis? We'll be back to it, so no worries if you're holding on to some half-formed thoughts still. We have years and years, God willing. I am going to close the ark. And I invite everyone to unmute as we will move towards the conclusion of services with the full Kaddish. So if you'd like to unmute and respond to the Kaddish, please do so. Yitkadal v'yikadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yamad yivrach v'yitei v'amlich malchutei b'chayachon v'machon uchay v'chol Beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah. Barach v'shabach v'par v'chman linaseh v'tadar v'toi v'talal shmei v'kudisha. Elam mikol berchata v'shirata tishvata v'nachamata damiran be'alma v'yimeru. Amen. Kavat rodon l'chol Beit Yisrael kadam mohon v'shmaya v'yimeru. Amen. Shalom Rav min Shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mrama v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael
v'yimeru. Amen.
And we'll go back on mute, and we will move towards the end of services with Aleinu. And I invite you all to stand and join me on the Aleinu on page 183. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol atei kedula leotzer reshit shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot velo samanu kemishpachot hadama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'goraleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yoseh la'aretz u'moshe v'ikaro b'shamayim yimal shchinatu zo begavhei meromim hu Eloheinu ein od emet malkeinu efesulato kakatuv b'torato v'yadata yom hashevota elevavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imal v'al haaretz mitachat ein od kakatuv b'toratecha Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Vayom hahu Yeh Adonai Echad. Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo Echad. And in just a moment, I'll invite anyone who would like to unmute for the Mourner's Kaddish. This week, Congregation Ahavas Achim marks the Yortzeiten of Edward Litkovsky and Rose Fish. May their memories be a blessing. If you would like to unmute and join me in the Kaddish, please do so.
Over to
Gadal, Vit Gadash, Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Ve'alma, Divrach Yirtei, Ve'amlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, Yomechon, U'chayei, the whole Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Hariv, V'imru, Amen.
Amen. Hey, Shmei Rabban Mevorach, Ve'olam Amei Omayah.
Yitbarach, Yitabach, Yitpa'ar, Yitromam, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha, Brichu, Ela, Minkol, Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbachata, V'nechemata, Damiran, Be'alma, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shlamarabba, Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom, B'mav, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, Amen. Anyone who is standing may be seated, and I'm going to put us all back on mute. Once again, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here and for getting our year of 2021 shul services and programming and Zoom life off to a good and energetic and thought-provoking start. Once again, Yasher Koach to Max Kirstein for leading us so wonderfully through so much of the beginning of this morning's services. And of course to Mike for the Haftarah and anyone else who participated and contributed. Thank you all. This week, Tuesday night adult ed, Thursday morning minyan, Friday evening children's song time, story time, candlelighting, all kind of the usual greatest hits. And then next Sunday at 4 p.m. Is when we will be hosting Imam Taimullah to talk about the Islamic perspective on the story of Abraham and Ishmael. Like I said in the announcements, he taught my Intro to Islam class last year. He's a fascinating guy, great thinker, great speaker and teacher. I encourage you to come and invite your friends. And on that note of coming and inviting your friends, as I wrote in the New Year's announcement, this year will be our 125th anniversary of the founding of Congregation Ahavas Achim, which is pretty incredible. That's a really wonderful milestone. And certainly over the course of the year, I would love to get people more involved. I think over the course of the next 6 weeks, we have a really strong slate of programming that I think appeals. I know one of the things that I commonly hear, certainly around like the high holiday time or around services, different stuff like that as well. The traditional stuff is not necessarily what appeals to me. Over the next 6 weeks, I think we have a really strong slate of programming lining up that certainly touches on some of the traditional stuff, but also goes really far outside those bounds, including this speaker next Sunday, including the week after that, when doctors Joe Gross and Josh Tarkin will be, helping give us some guidance and information on the COVID vaccine, and then at the end of the month, the workshop on Jewish end of life practices and thinking. Stuff that I think is really both kind of thought-provoking and practical for everyone who's attached to our community. And so, if there are friends in the community who don't often come, whether they're members or non-members, and you're in touch with them, really, do us a favor and try to call some of their attention to this stuff, because I think it's a really good emblematic showing of what we're putting out for the greater Jewish and the greater Newburyport community, and the greater New York community sometimes, and Pennsylvania. We're drawing from all over these days, which is really wonderful. Any other announcements or things you want the community to know before we conclude with Hatikva and Kiddush? Yeah, Mike.
I just have a question. I didn't get it in before you ended the Torah part. Okay, so there's 12 tribes, and there often is talk of the 10 lost tribes. I don't know that that comes from outside of Jewish tradition. But besides Judah, who was the other tribe that wasn't lost?
That's a great question. I need to do some research unless someone else knows.
I'm guessing it was Benjamin, but I'm not sure.
I think it was Benjamin. That was what I was going to say to Mike, but I'm not sure either.
I'm not sure, and I just wanted to hear that.
Well, that's everyone's homework assignment for this week is figure out what the other non-lost tribe is. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, Leslie, if you want to unmute yourself.
For the Sunday programs, do we sign in the same way we do for this?
The links can all be found in the e-blast. So there's different, it's not the same recurring link. And for the Sunday programs, each week will be different. We'll send out at least one dedicated email the week before, but otherwise you can find each week's link in the e-blast.
Okay, thanks.
And that's also a good reminder in terms of inviting friends and sharing with friends. Everyone is welcome. We ask though that, of course, if you do want to invite friends, just email them the link personally, and please don't post any links on social media or blast them out to the entire world, because unfortunately Zoom security is still a thing, and we want to make sure our programs go off uninterrupted and without a hitch. But again, personal invitations are welcome. So thank you for that reminder. All right, let's move towards Kiddush. First, we will conclude with Hatikva all together. I invite you to rise. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya fateh mizrach kadima ayin letzion sofia. Oh, lo abda tikvatenu, ha-tikva bat shnot alpayim, liot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Liot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Beni uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Ki shesh yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz, veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafa, Shabbat vayinafa, Shabbat vayinafash, veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Hashem barach Adonai Yom HaShabbat v'kadsheinu sabri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.